guys. Tony Angus here, out and about, with another telling it like it is tip for communicating effectively and managing conflict. And today I feel like having a bit more of a say than some of the other recent posts. So I'm really going to tell it like it is more than I've done for a while. And the reason is I'm fed up to here with the people who are offended by stuff all the time. It's become almost impossible to have a conversation. It's impossible to have an opinion. It's an impossible task to get into an argument with someone without having people become offended by something. And so there's a few thoughts that I have on being offended, and I want to share those with you. First of all, in order to be offended, anything you're offended at must be inherently offensive. So this can't just be your choice about being offended. If we leave it up to individual choice about who gets offended and why, then we won't be able to say anything at all, because there'll surely be somebody offended by what you say. I half expect someone to be offended at this post. Not that I care a whole lot about that. So for a thing to be offensive to you, it must be inherently offensive. Now, what does that mean? It means that it must be offensive on its own, without any seasoning, without any flavouring, and without you just being in a bad mood. So the thing itself must be, even if written on paper, offensive to the majority of people. And so let me give you a handful of ideas and thoughts about how that would play out. If you were to read in a newspaper the statement, "Police are on the lookout for a man of African appearance in relation to a crime," that statement is not inherently offensive. It's a statement of fact that simply points out the appearance of the person. Because otherwise, everybody of every nationality has the opportunity to be offended. If the article said the police are on the lookout for a man of Caucasian appearance, then Caucasians can be offended by that. If the person was of Mediterranean appearance, then people from the Mediterranean region of the world could be offended by that. And if the article said they were from an Asian country or the Middle East or the subcontinent, people from those places could be offended by that. And so that leaves the police with no choice but to make no comment about the appearance of the person. And that is unworkable. So we need to not do that, and we need to not encourage anything that puts a halt to proper investigation for crimes. So if that article went on to say, or instead said, typically the police are on the lookout for a male of African appearance, that would be inherently offensive, because you're suggesting that because the person is of African appearance, then typically they would be involved in crime, or of Caucasian appearance, or Middle Eastern appearance, or Asian, or wherever they're from. And so just by adding the word typically in there, you make it an inherently offensive statement. And people from whatever region was mentioned have the right, and possibly should be, offended, and have the right and probably should take offence, but take umbrage and approach the newspaper about that. You may recall I did a post on rights and responsibilities. Well, just to remind you You have the right to an opinion. And in most Western countries, you have the right to a freedom of speech. So you have a right to proclaim your beliefs in an open forum. However, as part of a society, you have a responsibility attached to every right you have. You drive a car, you have a right to drive. Well, the responsibility is you obey the laws and you drive in accordance with, good traffic flow, etc., and for the needs of other people on the road. You have the right to an opinion. The responsibility attached to that is that you don't vilify or insult or offend other people. It's that simple. If you can't do that, now, sometimes you're going to offend some people, but again, we go back to the rules of being offensive. First rule, is it inherently offensive? Okay, so if you're meeting your responsibility, then go for it. Rule number 2 about whether something is offensive or you should take offence. Was it intended to be offensive? Did the person who made the statement intend that someone would be offended? Now, the only reason this is included is because sometimes people make mistakes. We live in such a politically correct world at the moment, and there are civil libertarians ready to bounce up and down about anything that they find offensive or upsetting in any way. And so, we have to be careful, but sometimes we do trip over ourselves. And I've had examples of that where I've been very well-meaning, but have made an offensive statement and have had to apologise. I've even apologised for statements that I didn't think were offensive. And that's the basis of this vlog. That's the background of this vlog, is that I've made comments in my training programs to groups and found people to be offended by something that I had no intention of causing offence. So, without going into any great detailed stories, but I made a comment in a training room about an incident that I had attended as a police member. And this incident involved an ethnic group. And in fact, not an ethnic group, a cultural group. And a woman in there became offended that I was telling that story. I told the story to make a point, and the point was not to denigrate the race at all. I am one of the least racist people in the world. I believe wholeheartedly in multiculturalism. Anyway, the woman became offended, so I had to apologise and just say I mean no offence by what I'm saying. And so, really it was up to her, I feel, to cut me some slack in that regard, given that the statements and the story I had shared were not intended to cause offence. Which brings me to the third point, and that is, if the statement is inherently offensive and intended to cause offence, you still have a choice about how you take it. Being offended by something is a choice. Your emotional response to any situation is a choice that you make. And so you can't just say that there's a default setting called taking offence. And whenever you hear certain phrases and whenever you hear or somebody says something to you, you now refer or revert to your default setting, which is, I'm offended by that. There's all sorts of other responses that you can have. You can ask to enter into a dialogue with them. You can seek to broaden that person's horizon. You can first of all, ask their intent and discuss their intent and where does that come from and why do you feel that way, and had you considered that people might take offence to what you're saying? I've said several times in my vlogs, one of the ugliest human responses and human behaviours is indignation. And people turn their nose up and become all pompous and indignant. And that's typical when someone's offended by something. Well, you have better options. You have options that are more balanced and more adult and more mature and likely to create better relationships or maintain better relationships. And I think you should think about using those than being indignant and being offended. So for me, if any one of these is not present, then you don't really have offence. If it's not inherently offensive, you don't have offence. If the other person had no intent to cause offence, you don't have offence. And if you've got another way of going about it, you don't have offence. Righto, guys. If you found this useful, please don't forget to hit like and click share and leave comments. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. You've got to sign on to YouTube, as you know. And I'll look forward to talking to you again on the next post. You guys stay well. Ciao for now.